All right, so in this video, we'll set up DBT Cloud, a trial account for us. And we're on the getdbt.com website. This is their main website. And go to Start Free. So as it says here, we can start our 14-day free trial. Just a quick setup, get it together, and see what we're doing. So what we need to do first is add our email, kind of the standard email company and all that, and then select Create My Account. So I'm going to pause and set that up for myself. So I have this filled out, create my account. As it says, you need to verify your account, so I'll go ahead and do that. So I've verified my account, and after clicking the link, it sends me to this page here, which is Setup Analytics. And this is a guide that's going to kind of walk you through how to set up a project. And they're setting up the first project, which is called Analytics right here. And at the top, we can see we have our workspace and then Analytics. So let's walk through this together and we'll continue. So what this is doing is very similar to what we did manually through the DBT init process, where we picked the database provider that we were using. And then also we'll start getting into the profiles.yaml where we set up our configurations. So under the hood, they're kind of handling all of this for you, but just making it in a nice interface. So we will do Snowflake. What do we want to call the connection? We'll give it a name, Snowflake. And again, this should look very similar to our profiles.yaml that was set up initially. And this is why I think it's important to go through the CLI first, because it gives you perspective on what's happening here. So what I've actually done here is put side by side our local profiles and then what they're trying to set up here to put in perspective what is happening here and what the difference is. So we can put our account. So I'm going to just copy and paste all of this over. And then next we have a development credentials section. And what this is saying is this is your personal development credentials. And you can think of this as the dev environment. And that's why we often have our own schema. And remember how DBT will deploy it with that custom schema by default with the prefix of your schema underscore and all that. So that's kind of what they're alluding to here. And it's saying it's going to use these connections to develop, and they're not deployment credentials. So in DBT Cloud, they specify these as two different things. You have your development credentials and then deployment credentials. And they are kind of exactly what they sound like. They're both set up very similarly, but their purpose is different. And when you're just developing in the worksheet, as you'll see, you'll only be using development credentials. There's different authentication methods. We could key pair or use a password. We'll do the username and password here. Then we have the default schema here, and you can see it gave us one based on our name. It's our first initial and last name. That's just what I put. But we can use the same one as before. We did that similarly here. And you can see that is the convention that they're suggesting. Target name, they're saying here default, but in our case we have dev, but we can just leave it as default. It doesn't really matter. It's just you need to remember what you're calling it, but the purpose here is the same as either of these. Threads 4, let's just keep that. Now let's test the connection, make sure we're good. Successful, continue. Next is setting up a repository, and we can see there's a few different options here. We have manage, which is DBT Cloud, essentially offering that service to version control and manage your repository for you. The other is git clone if you want to go to a private repo or something else through the git command. Next is GitHub, which is what we've been using and what we'll use here. And then the fourth option is GitLab, which is very similar to GitHub, just another provider. So let's go and set up our connection to GitHub and point it to our existing one. We need to authorize DBT Cloud permission. Let's go ahead and do that. Now mine didn't go through right away, so I need to configure the integration through the profile. Let's select this. And what this did was take me to essentially this link here. It's profiles, integrations, and we need to configure GitHub integration. It wasn't successful originally. Let me try this again. We're going to give it to only select repositories. And in my case, it's just DBT training, obviously. So go ahead and install. You need to make sure your browser is connected to that so it can settle that configuration for you. And now we can see it's connected to GitHub and we're ready to go. So now I'll go back to home and we can finish setting up analytics. Let's click back on GitHub. We'll select this one to import. And we can see successfully imported our repository. Continue. Now, if you had an empty one, you could have done that as well and then just started from scratch. But in our case, we're going to use the one that we already built. So again, if you're starting from scratch, you could have just initialized an empty project and use this instead. Now we can invite users, but let's just skip this and we're all set. So our free trial is up. It's going to end in 14 days. And to continue using it after, you need to select the plan, obviously, but we're going to continue on the free trial. Now that we're all set up, in the next lesson, we'll go through the layout of dbt Cloud and talk about the workflow in this compared to the command line interface.